Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and this show is going to be an interesting one. Not that they're boring, but we've had a number of conversations online over the last week or so since Infocom about what happened, about how important it was, about what end users are thinking. And I figured the best thing to do is not put my opinion on that, but actually ask some real end users in the industry. So I've got three prominent well-known end users joining me today. I'm going to ask each one of them to introduce themselves. Kevin, you're first on my list, so why don't you go and introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Thanks, David. Kevin Hyatt, formerly of the Walt Disney Company. I spent almost 28 years there in the collaboration side, senior manager over the workplace services and connected experience. So basically all of the endpoints and meeting technologies for the company.
Thank you for joining, Kevin. Pete, what about you?
Hi, I'm Pete Kolak. I am now with Roku, just recently joined. I've spent about 30 years in the industry, being engineering and over teams. And here at Roku, I'm the senior manager of AV technologies.
Awesome. And Gary?
Hi, I'm Gary Lasasso. I'm with Amicus Therapeutics, although I should say that I'm with BioMarin because we were recently acquired by BioMarin. Still have an Amicus email address, so it's a little hard getting used to right now. Thanks, David, for inviting me to join this group. I have so much respect for Kevin and Pete and yourself also, and to be able to spend this time with you guys and talk about this industry, which I've been in for more than a decade now, working with video conferencing and innovation and AI now. So to have this conversation with all of you is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really do appreciate you joining me as well. So you were all at Infocom. Let's talk about Infocom at a high level, first of all. How many years have you been going? How many have you gone to? And for now, let's go in the order we started with. So Kevin, it doesn't have to be an exact number, but it wasn't your first show, was it?
No, it wasn't. We were trying to think about this earlier, I guess, is at least 15 years. Thankfully, it's obviously been a little bit easy because I'm Orlando based. So, flip-flopping between years has been pretty easy, but at least 15 years, yeah.
And every other year is easier, less travel for you.
Exactly, yeah.
Pete, what about you?
I'm probably the same, 15 years, maybe 20. I was also trying to think back to my first one, and I don't remember where it was. I think it might have been with Adobe, actually. So probably about 15 years.
Okay, and Gary?
I've been attending since 2014. That was my first one. I was actually brought on board to help launch video conferencing at Amicus. We wanted to have video conferencing in every room. So I thought, well, where do I need to go to find the latest and greatest? And that's where I ended up at Infocom. And I was telling stories earlier about some of the technologies that we attempted to try and didn't quite work out. Yeah, it's been a long.
Well, that's how you know what's going to work. You try new stuff and you just keep it in a limited environment. So
yeah.
All of you think about the answer to this question, and whoever gets a good answer first, just chime right in. What's changed the most over, let's say, the last decade in terms of attending that show and what you see from the AV and collaboration and UC space? What's the biggest, most impactful difference other than AI? We can talk about AI as long as we want, but what feels different when you think about that first show to this one?
I can go first. I think because I remember the first show and the word that stuck with me was interoperability. They were talking about, conference rooms and interoperability, collaboration and different types of tools. This was, long before Microsoft Teams. And I mean, we were using BlueJeans, as our first video conference solution. So I think that was the word that stuck out to me. And I think it was a lot about some of the physical hardware, digital signage. I recall being very prominent back then. Now you can't turn without you can't shake a stick without hitting AI. But back then I think it was a lot of the we were looking at Prism at the time for digital collaboration and multi-sites. And we wanted to be cutting edge with our collaboration. So that's kind of what we were looking at back in those days.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think if you look back, in like the high or gigantic pillar items, and this is really going to date some of us, but you look back at ISDN versus IP versus SIP, and then you start introducing the kind of the hardware pieces, and then obviously now you've got the meeting platform. So I think at the end of the day, and all those things in between, especially like certain things that now are kind of table stakes, which is like one meeting or one button to join for meetings, right? Really, those nuances I think kind of really ultimately play into it. But I think from a meeting platform side, I think versus it used to be hardware, now it's meeting platform is really the driver of decisions.
So unified communications is the other word for it, which is anything but unified, Dave, as we've joked several times about, which is that collaboration or connections between disparaging devices in a room. What I've noticed a big change in over the years is how now everything's starting to when you go with one provider, you can actually pair all these devices in a room instead of home running things. So a lot of movement towards the connection over the network, devices not having to connect directly to your device. That's kind of a big, I think, progress forward over the years. And ISDN and IP changes over the last 30 years is big.
Yeah, I would say that our skill set 10, 15 years ago didn't necessarily need to involve IP connectivity. And now I guess it necessarily does. We've always talked about how collaboration and conferencing is kind of the canary in the cave, where when something's fluttering a little bit, our stuff goes down first. So now there are ways to monitor that and manage that, and we all have to kind of be good at it. And Pete, as you point out, you're right. A lot of the connectivity between components now is pure IP. There isn't as much home runs, and Cisco's out there now with everything connecting over IP. So there's a lot of interesting things. Any standouts from this year's show that you saw that you can talk about? I know you were all in some whisper suites and NDA booths, which is probably where you spend most of your time, but don't bring those up because I don't want to get any of us in trouble. But other than that, is there anything, or even from those, are there any themes that you feel?
Well, I mean, kind of playing off what you were saying, David, I think one of the themes is monitoring and, kind of that self-healing aspect of things. So companies like Utelogy or Excite or any of those companies, I think, add that extra layer of reducing the complexity for people who have to manage the environments, and then obviously the end users or customers kind of obviously reap the benefits of that from an auto heal or management, or try to at least get in front of the issues versus the firefighting that used to happen years ago.
Agreed. Anything else, guys?
I'd like to second that, the self healing, the auto healing. It would be nice if they started moving towards or more intelligent alerting, where instead of just telling me one thing's down, I've actually talked to AVI-SPL Symphony about this. Can you just tell me, like, hey, I got 13 devices that went down, instead of telling me 13 devices went down, tell me that the network went down, or something that makes sense to help my team do better troubleshooting. I don't think anybody's there yet. And AI being the big conversation, I don't really think it's AI. I think it's just better programming, because you can't really do self-healing unless you teach it how to self-heal. So it's not really self-healing. It's taught self-healing, which is interesting. So getting into the AI aspect, I think, will be more of a natural language change to all of this, which is going to be better, because my team having to go in and tell it, go into a device and reboot the device versus saying, hey, reboot all devices that are alerting with this fashion. That'll help a lot of the streamlining in the future, I believe.
Okay. There are some companies doing that. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't want to be like echoing everybody else, but, Kevin mentioned Utelogy, but I think NetSpeak is another one that we've had a chance to kick the tires on, and, pretty impressive. And I think they are getting pretty close in that self-healing space, using AI and, sort of teaching their agent to understand all of the different technologies, whether it be Need or Logi or Zoom or Teams or whatever, and just kind of all under one roof to be able to check rooms in the morning, make sure rooms are running, and then hopefully at some point they'll be able to raise a ticket in ServiceNow to say, hey, room XYZ is down and this is what's wrong with it. And I can't fix it because it needs a cord replaced. I don't know, making that up, right? But what it can fix, it does. So I think that was one that I think is on the forefront, was fairly impressive that I saw at the show.
And
Just
David,
to add on,
I was going to echo that too, and I think there's a couple of things with that is with especially like with NetSpeak and other companies that are kind of getting into this space is it's obviously there's some level of customer facing things in regards to like the self healing and pieces of that nature, but also on the back end side, really the automation around deployments. So large scale companies and organizations who need to deploy a high number of systems, I think those types of tools are going to come into play ultimately. So I think it's a good opportunity. I think there's a competitive landscape now with a lot of these different companies that we've talked about. So we'll kind of see where the spear kind of lands.
what I didn't see, and I was looking for, is I didn't really see any answer to what I think we all know what's coming, is the interoperability issue, where you can go between systems and call between Zoom and WebEx and Teams. That's a big problem in our company because I actually have a thing going on our network where I can see how many calls are going through Zoom versus Teams through WebEx. And although it's a small number, where we're a Zoom house, watching Teams connect, I can see like maybe 10, 13 a day out of probably 1,500 calls. But for our customers that are experiencing Google Teams, WebEx, they're not getting the native experience. And I haven't seen anybody try to answer that except for like outside services that give you like a connection doesn't give you all the native features.
All right, I was surprised none of you brought up this, because 10, 15 years ago, we were picking one of these things up to make a call.
Yeah.
And we had to be smart enough to know how to use it. And if it was this, or if it was a program touch panel in the room, you still had to be smart enough how to use it. For the most part now, the cameras aim themselves, the sound fixes itself, and you don't need to bring that knowledge into the room. So yeah, it's been a major change in our lifetime while we've been doing that. But since you brought it up, since
Yeah,
we all
David, real quick, remember we used to have to program the touch panels in the rooms and have to wait weeks to get the stuff programmed. So
Oh,
what's
absolutely.
changed? I mean, things are much simpler these days than they were, 15 years ago, 12
Things
years ago. Yeah.
well, I like to describe it as kind of moving up the stack, in that there used to be this many rooms that had to be custom programmed and this many rooms that you could just drop in and use. And the drop in and use has started moving up and up and up to the point where only like the boardrooms and the very complicated spaces and the stadiums need to be customized. We have a lot more off-the-shelf solutions, which is good or bad depending upon how you look at it. But I agree with you. It's very, very interesting and very different. Now, the interop question, I want to phrase this very carefully because I don't want to plant thoughts in anybody's head. Um,
You won't
I'm,
with this group. That's okay.
yeah, I know that's true. There are a lot of opinions here. Um, I'm of the opinion that people have picked sides already, that they're on the platform that they're going to use. And if they make it easier to switch or harder to switch, it's not going to really make that much difference. That's not why people are switching. So, from an interoperability standpoint, there's one camp that says, keep me on the platform that I'm comfortable with, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx or Google Meet. Those are the big four. And then if I need to make a call to the other one, just make sure that it can connect. I don't care about high-end features or high-end anything else. Just has to make sure that it comes through, but I'm on my primary system. And then there's this whole other camp that says, I want the boarding pass selector, which nobody uses boarding passes anymore. They all use their mobiles. But I want to walk into the room, and if it's a Zoom call, I want a full native Zoom experience. And if it's a Teams call, I want a full native Teams experience. And I need to be able to switch back and forth during the day, just like I can on my mobile phone. Where do you guys now again, not from I've been accused, or a number of people have been accused without naming, of being the old guys that remember how it was. So without putting any mores on us being the old guys, what do your users want? What do you hear from your thousands of users in terms of the experience they want in their rooms? Because it's ridiculous to say that rooms can now be on one platform all day, all the time. We know that's not the case. We all switch back and forth. What do you hear from your users that they want?
So I can start. They our platform is Zoom, and it could change to Teams any day now, which is who knows, because we already pay for Teams. But a corporation isn't making decisions on what platform to use based on what kind of lockouts are done by the company. So I'm not going to choose a Zoom platform or a Teams platform because one or the other has locked out, because everybody's locking it out. We're picking the solution that's best going to meet our needs, and having the ability for a customer to go in a room and join whatever meeting was invited to them by whoever invited them. It could be an outside customer. It could be internally. We might have two platforms. Some people run two platforms. They have a backup platform. Whatever that is, the customers just want to be able to go in and join it natively. The fact that everybody out there is blocking it from being able to join natively is, to me, I talk about being old guys. That's old guys. I mean, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was the one who locked out the operating system. Most companies now and most people now want that open experience. I can go on my phone and join any one of those devices from my phone natively and have the native experience running natively. Why can't I do it on my Kodak? That's what the customers are asking us.
I mean, I agree. I think you look at it from a couple different lenses. You look at it kind of the old proverb of, what are you doing for the end users versus what are you doing to the end users? I think ultimately, that's kind of the ethos that everybody kind of needs to run through, obviously at different scales. But I think the other thing you also have to remember too is when you mentioned, everybody's kind of chosen their camps. I think that's true, but I think it's also at the speed as to which, that comes to completion. So for example, if you are migrating from one platform to another, a lot of days it's not a yearly thing, it's a multi-year thing. And if you compound that with all the different other companies that you're communicating with, or groups, it kind of obviously kind of creates some divisiveness around the capabilities that have happened. So at the end of the day, we want users to just be able to walk into a room. They don't care from a platform side. They get the same experience from a quality, video and audio. And obviously also the kind of the join experience. I think that ultimately is the play. So whether that's software based or hardware based, I think that's a key takeaway.
Gary?
Yeah, I think when you look at our, at end users, they're, in our case, we're a small, now mid-sized biotech company with the acquisition. They're scientists. They're people in regulatory. They're not the video conferencing experts. They want simplicity. They want to, if they don't use a room for a couple of weeks because of this hybrid world we live in, and they come back into a room, they don't care what the platform is. They don't care about codecs or any of that stuff or how things are connected. They want to walk into a room and they want it to work. And frankly, what COVID did was they want it to work like it works on our laptops. That we were able to go home and work from our laptop on any platform we wanted, and it became, because we're a two platform company, even though we're a small company, we both Zoom and Teams. Because we need a couple of things. One, for disaster recovery. If one goes down, we need to have the other as a backup to be able to use. And then we also have meetings that come from different platforms. So we want, frankly, the Zoom rooms, and I think Pete's talked about this being a Zoom shop. In the bigger rooms, those experiences are better. So we've built our boardroom with Zoom. We have center cameras. We have, and the people remotely love the experience because they see everybody. So I don't think, like I said, the end user doesn't care about the platform. I think that is sort of the old guy thing. It's like, hey, we've been around the industry, we know about the technology, but they kind of don't care about that. They care about just the thing working. And I think also that I don't know if we've beaten them into submission to just accept mediocrity, and that you can get a native experience if you use Zoom in this room or Teams in this room. But if you go join the Zoom room with Teams or Teams room with Zoom, you're not getting a native experience. And they're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just look at everything on one monitor, and I can't have two monitors, or I can't see the people on the bottom because it's not and they're just like, they just accept it. It's become good enough, has become the standard maybe. And we've, beaten everyone into submission.
David, I mean, the other piece about this too is, I guess I would use the word overhead, right? There's a level of overhead that has to happen today in regards to the interoperability. There's a reason why, these third-party companies provide interop between these different meeting tools, which I think is great from a competition perspective, but from an overhead side for the inside from an AV professional or collaboration leader, I think it obviously compounds the troubleshooting and the difficulty and the deployment methodologies and whatnot. So I would just implore everyone to think about, how much simpler and how much faster we would get to, a end state if we didn't have that kind of overhead when it comes to deployments.
You guys have all mentioned the word native. By native experiences, what I assume you're referring to is dual screen, is more convenient ingest, is access to the chat, is screens laid out the way you expect them to be laid out, things like that. Is that what we're talking about here? That you're looking for in the rooms?
And other features like pairing your phone to the room when it's not invited to launch the call for you, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
Transcriptions.
think,
Yeah. All of those. Yeah. All of those things.
Right.
yeah,
So if I'm
but it
playing
does go to
devil,
the other layers is like really kind of those unique things that sit within those platforms. I'll use Microsoft Teams as an example, is the limitations, the previous limitations with like the tools like PowerPoint Live and whatnot, and trying to shim that together, had been a challenging experience in the past until some levels have been unlocked within the different organizations. But I mean, I do think it's everything from ultimately it's the meeting experience is what we're trying to transgress.
so the question that keeps coming up, if I'm going to play devil's advocate for the other side of the argument, is if you want a room that can run, let's say, native Teams and native Zoom at the push of a button, you going to pay for two licenses in that room?
I think if that's what we want, yeah, we would.
I mean, we
Well, I
already
think,
are. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
but I also think that to my previous point, it also, from a financial aspect, it does offset certain circumstances when it comes to, what's included in your current agreements with, these large companies, and also what, other overhead items that you have today that are providing that interoperability, that basically potentially could provide a financial offset too. So, um, and it's always hard to identify where the industry is going in that regard, right? Because who knew that a lot of these large companies would auto include like Teams licenses or Teams. Now Microsoft's obviously kind of changed the two years ago they changed kind of the MTR licensing, but things evolve. So I think it may be a bump and maybe not really a mountain to climb.
All right. So it doesn't seem like there's any hesitation around that. I think there are still problems that need to be solved from an engineering standpoint to do this. I don't think the ability to switch back and forth between the platforms on a compute device, whether it's a Windows device or an Android device or anything else you're throwing in, or Linux device, I think we all understand that can work. That's not an engineering challenge. The challenge then is if you've got a room that has four meeting platforms, where are you doing the calendaring? What notifications are you getting? How do you make sure that you don't book a Zoom call and a Teams call at the same time in the same room? Where does that logic sit? And then there's the whole argument about security, which is if I'm not securing the platform, because I'm allowing all these other pieces of software in there, who's responsible for a failure? Who's responsible for break fix? Things like that. So there are challenges. I'm not minimizing them, but it sounds like, or at least my belief is, the challenges are not insurmountable, and it sounds like it's what you guys users are looking for as well.
Well, the
I
room has one calendar, right? So you invite whatever meeting to that one calendar. It's not like you have more than one calendar for the room.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I think that's part of a change management piece. But David, kind of going back to what you were just saying, I think the other part about that is, life cycle management. I think part of this is going to be is can these devices today handle the horsepower that's required to switch between those different platforms? So from a future proofing side, it's not something that, especially large companies, they can't just, on a dime kind of flip thousands of room systems over to another hardware platform if those platforms um, can't manage the kind of interoperability nirvana that everyone's talking about.
So the one of the key points that keeps coming up when interoperability is discussed, and we've been discussing this for decades, and we will be discussing this for decades, is that it's not going to change until buyers force the change. The manufacturers could not care less. They don't want to lose customers. They want to keep everybody in their walled gardens. They're not, most of them are not going to do anything to make things easier, with some major exceptions that have come up. I mean, kudos to Cisco for having native Zoom rooms now, and they do Teams, and they've become more interoperable for what used to be a closed shop. But this whole idea is that you guys aren't working hard enough. If it were, it's not going to change until you look at Microsoft and say, I demand that you let me switch apps. And you look at Zoom and say, I demand that you let me switch to Microsoft when I need to. How do you reply to that? How do you answer that? How do we build a groundswell, or do we build a groundswell of requests to get them to move off of this is the way it is and there's no changing?
I think, unfortunately for me, or fortunately, I work for small mid-sized companies. I don't think that we have that influence. I used to joke with Kevin that we would test things out and then let him know if it worked, so that they could try it at Disney. So we were their pilot in a lot of cases. I don't think we have the the clout to, I don't. In fact, I don't know if the bigger companies do, because Microsoft is so large that, does it matter if one of their big clients, like pushes them and says, I'm leaving? I don't know the answer to that. So,
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is, I think there's abilities to implore, the conversations amongst the large companies, whether it's Cisco's or Microsoft's or whomever. I think it's kind of a to a degree. It's on what battle do you want to kind of pick when it comes to some of that stuff. And I think going back, I think that's kind of the reason why large companies try to stay as agnostic to a degree as possible, because you can't dictate if company A is using one meeting platform and it talks to company B a lot and they're using meeting platform B. So I think from an agnostic side, I think that has to kind of just stay um, a key takeaway. But yeah, I mean, there's been good conversations with a lot of these companies. I've seen kind of the changes that specifically Microsoft and Ilya and team have put together throughout the years. Really transgressing from just Windows centric devices now to Android, loosening up some of the requirements within Microsoft Teams. Is it fast enough? I think that's probably maybe the debate. But you also have to remember that they're not really a hardware manufacturer in that regard. They're really the meeting platform team, and they're ultimately kind of deciding, how companies should choose, which is a little bit different than in the previous years.
I think how it's going to happen is it's going to be pretty much a free market push, and it's probably going to be another party coming in and working with another party and pushing out the one who stalls or doesn't want to change, because that's usually how it happens.
Well, and I think
Somebody
that's
else.
where I've seen. I think that's where I've seen kind of the movement with specifically with Cisco, right? Is they've really driven some of this. They were the first one that really was a true hardware provider that provided not only their native experience with WebEx, but then also they added Teams, and they worked really closely with Microsoft. And then separately, I think the reins is now loosened in regards, and they're able to do that now too with Zoom. But ultimately, again, it goes back to native experience. Can the devices handle it? But I think it's a slow progression, I guess, is really the outcome right now.
Okay. And last question for the three of you guys before we break away. Um, uh, the third party companies that are jumping into the space right now, and some have been there for a very long time. I know some of them are certified, and some of them are not certified, but it works. And some of them claim that they're certified because they're being certified because of Azure and something else. And that whole thing they're going to have to work on amongst themselves. But do you care? do you care if you're getting a product or a solution from a third party that's connecting all these things together? Gary, you said you were an initial Blue Jeans guy. Do you care if you're getting a service from a company like that, but they're not offering a certified solution? So if something breaks, you're only dealing with them, or you're on your own?
No, I don't care. I think the challenge is, if Microsoft, Zoom, Cisco, et cetera, changes, makes an update to the platform, and then does it break on that third party platform? That's the challenge. I don't care. I would love if there would be a third party solution. I think Pete was saying it earlier. You walk in, you push a button, it doesn't matter. You pick up your phone, and I could do all of those platforms. So whether it be Pexip or whoever's out there that's doing that, it would be great. We would definitely do it. But like I said, my fear is that the next time there's an update to Windows, there's an update to the Teams or Zoom platform, and we go to version 10.7, then now it's broken, and who's going to fix that? So that's the fear there.
My preference is always to have it certified. I would rather have all my products, legit, because it's something that you got to be responsible for. That's my preference. I just wish that they would loosen it up, because I don't understand anymore why they would restrict it. It doesn't make sense anymore. So third party is great, but I don't think it's something we would take on.
Coming from a large organization, I think maybe I would have a little bit tighter lens. I mean, it has to obviously meet the security requirements. Obviously now with all the things that are AI driven, the AI governance aspect of things. But at the end of the day, I would almost rather go more direct to the meeting platform owners and hardware providers to see how we can solve that, not to eliminate these third party companies, because I know, David, you'd mentioned in a video that recently that there's some new small players that are kind of bridging that. But I agree with Gary. I think the concern that I would have is ultimately if a meeting platform really truly changes some of the scale and scope that it does, how fast I think these companies can move fast, but how are they going to be made aware if they're not kind of quote unquote Microsoft or Cisco certified, and become kind of a bit player? So I think that's going to be the big problem.
I know some of the players in the industry are going to want to follow up with the three of you. So, do you want me to just tell everybody to find you on LinkedIn, or do you want to give some email contacts, or how would you like to be reached out to?
LinkedIn is perfect.
Are you going to be our agent? You can. No, certainly LinkedIn. Or yeah, for sure.
For a fee, they can have my email.
For a fee, okay, that's fine. Pete, you're one of the people like me. You've got like 15 emails in my contact sheet, company to company to company. So, all
thanks.
good. Thank you
Is
for
that a compliment? I hold a job, or I jump around a lot. Which one is it, David?
I've been a big believer in my career that you advance by going sideways up a ladder, up different ladders. But then there are people that have been with their company for 28 years, and then the question is, which one of us got dumped, and do we care? But I'm happy with where my life is right now, so I don't think that I could judge which one's better or worse. But I'm better for knowing the three of you, and I appreciate the time that you spent on this call, and I appreciate you for watching UC Weekly News every week. But for now, thanks for watching, and we will see you on next week's show.